Okay, I just wanted to go over some kind of more general Tekken concepts in relation to your comments. As you spoke about getting really, um, really diffused by my opponent's options is kind of what you said. And one of the big things you gotta keep in your head as you're learning the game is that Tekken is a game, and there's a couple things I mean by that. First of all, what I mean by that is your opponent has you and your opponent are always playing the game. You know, if you're trying, if you're throwing rock, they're throwing paper. Next time you're throwing paper, they're throwing scissors. But it's always about you always have to be playing the game unless you're fighting someone who is much lower in skill level than you. Then you can just kind of just like play things out by the rules, and they don't understand what's happening, and they'll lose. You'll win that way is just by having a greater understanding than the opponent by a large margin. But if you are fighting someone who is on your skill level, the idea is you have to both be playing the game the whole time. The other part I mean by Tekken is a game, well, it's not real life in the sense that no one is going to come by and enforce the rules of Tekken onto your opponent. There's nothing I can do to prevent my opponent from mashing when I get plus frames on them. There's nothing I can do to prevent them from ducking after I jab, you know? You talked about conditioning, but at the end of the day, conditioning is just a tool, and there's nothing guaranteed about it. So always be thinking, okay, always be in the game of Tekken, which is, you have a set of options and your opponent is going to try and counter them or apply their own set of options. Because a lot of what your comment was saying is, why did my opponent pick rock when I picked scissors? And the reality of it is you're both playing the game. It's your job to focus on learning the opponent in a way where you can predict their options or limit their options so that you have a better chance of landing the right reads. So to that extent, there's another little thing I wanted to talk about, because you said that you were trying to use jabs and down 4-1s to condition the opponent to stand block basically, and then try and cash out with a low, And you said, well, every time I do this, nothing happens. Every time I do this, I get hit with down 4-2. And one thing that can help you kind of one thing that think about in a situation like this, when you're talking about conditioning, there's weak conditioning and then there's like strong conditioning, right? So I can condition him to stand block by using pokes like you said. But
my goodness.
Obviously if all I'm doing is landing down 4-1s on counter hit,
oh my goodness,
because of my conditioning, there's really not a lot of deterrence going on here. The counter hit down 4-1 is it's not even more plus frames. It's only 2 more damage than a regular down 4-1. So when you're thinking about conditioning, you have to also think about the rewards that you're getting, or rather what your opponent is risking by trying to beat your conditioning, so to speak. So if you
oh my goodness,
you need to be getting there's a difference between conditioning with pokes and really making them pay for trying to interrupt, because it sounds like you also never try to catch your opponent interrupting you, because it seems like you're kind of expecting your opponent to play by the rules, which like I said from the beginning, the rules of Tekken are not enforced by any. There's no law enforcement here. You're the only one who can enforce the rules of Tekken on your opponent. So which means you do have to do things like jab into jab to check them mashing, or jab into shove to check them trying to use a quick low, or same thing with back 1+2. If you're trying to use those plus frames for lows, sometimes you need to check them with with shoves, catch them mashing, because if the reward on your conditioning is so low,
Oh
something
my
like a down 4-1 on a counter hit, I mean even a down 4-1-1, a lot of people are not going to be swayed by that. But if you catch them mashing jab after your jab with a little, flash duck into a full combo, that's the kind of conditioning that you can really enforce, or just take advantage of. Like I said, if they keep throwing the same options, you keep punishing them the same way. And that's another thing to learn too, is learning when your opponent is not playing the game and they just have that bad habit that you can exploit. To that extent, you also talked about, you said that your opponent likes to throw out keep out, and you're having a hard time, so you try dash blocking in order to bait out their keep out. The thing about dash blocking is similar concept to what I said with conditioning, with like something that's really weak, like jab into down forward 1. If they're not scared of your approach options, right? So if all you're doing is approaching with quick moves like jabs and down 4-1s, if that's all you're doing, or if you're just using really slow moves and the same way, and they're just blocking them and they're not scared of them in some way, they really... Okay, sorry, let me rephrase that. For them to throw out keep out moves, they have to be scared of your approaches. Or they just have to be... Or on the flip side, they might just be guessing because they are not scared. And they, in a way, like, this is something that Negans do too all the time, is they just sit back here, they watch you, like, dash blocking, blah, blah, blah. They're not really even thinking, they just say, and down 4-2. They're just trying to guess because they don't... You're not punishing them for guessing in this way. And to be a little bit more detailed, what I mean by punishing them in this way, if your opponent is throwing out keep out options, the best way to punish those options is a whiff punish. That's a strong conditioning that you can use to beat your opponent's keep out options. Because if you are, just dash blocking, if they choose a punishable option for keep out, yeah, you get your block punish. So that's something you keep in mind, is like you kind of notice what they like to use for keep out. But let's say your opponent does, like, safe keep out options, and you're dash blocking. If I'm the Negan on the right, I'm just gonna still throw out, because eventually what's gonna happen, one of these shoves is gonna counter hit me, and they're gonna reap a lot of reward for very little risk. And when you say I tried dash blocking to beat their keep out, or to bait their keep out, I mean, really what you should be doing to beat their keep out is a whiff punish, which, some moves are easier and harder to whiff punish, so that's another thing to keep in mind. But if you're not whiff punishing their keep out attempts, there's nothing to stop them from doing it. Like I said, even if you can block their keep out, if they're not throwing out really punishable moves, the conditioning is so weak there that you can't really enforce something from that, and that's kind of brings it back to what I said earlier, that Tekken is a game. Your opponent, there's no the laws of Tekken, they can break them whenever they want, and you're the only one who can enforce the rules or break the rules, and you gotta learn to observe your opponent well, find out when or where they like to break or follow the rules, right? So if you know that they really respect a certain move, you know, if they really respect a certain move, that's your cue to just like let it rip, you know? Annoy the crap out of them. If they're just gonna block this, that's great for you. Then you can cash out with lows and keep stacking on plus turns and keep them in a situation where they're uncomfortable. But if, you know, if a good player is fighting someone and they notice that, you know, they notice that you're just, you know, if they notice that you're just being a little bit too happy with the plus frames, it's their job in a way to enforce, you know, okay, you gotta frame trap me now, buddy, because I'm interrupting your pressure here, right? That's how you think about it from the defensive end. It's like, okay, my opponent keeps throwing out these big plus frame moves. He's not giving me a turn, I gotta steal the turn, you know? Just to wrap everything up, when you're playing, just make sure you remember this is a game for both you and your opponent. You're going to be trying to throw your options. They're going to be trying to beat it. They're going to be throwing their options. You got to try and beat it. There's no reason in thinking about what options are, you know, why is my opponent throwing scrubby options? Why is my opponent always beating my options? You know, you really, there's nothing good that can come about thinking of the game in that way. Just understand it's a game. They're going to be throwing their options. If you want to win, you're going to have to beat their options or consistently punish their bad options or their bad habits or what have you. There's no one's enforcing the rules. If your opponent is always trying to mash on your plus frames, throw out a frame trap and make sure to keep them honest. Yeah, and then the other thing with conditioning too is use if you're pretty confident or you're just not sure, it's always a good idea to sometimes go for a really hard punish on their options, because it creates a lot more pressure on the opponent than just, you know, like I said,
Oh my goodness.
randomly hitting some counter hit down 4-1s. It doesn't really change the course of the match so much, so it's not something that sticks in your head and the opponent's head as much. So yeah, with conditioning, make sure you recognize when you're using weak and strong conditioning. And then with keep out, they have to be scared of your approaches. So you got to use big moves with different timings to get them to throw keep out, because they're scared of you coming in, you know. But at the same time, if you never punish their keep outs with whiff punishes, that basically is telling them they're free to guess whenever they want. Because dash blocking, unless they're throwing out really punishable moves, is not you can't punish people by dash blocking. Dash blocking is just a safe way to make sure that you're not getting counter hit on the way in. Yeah, so just observe your opponent. Remember that you're both playing the game. You know, you got to keep playing the game until the end of the last round.